everyone, and welcome to our first series of the Cyber Ready video series that we're going to be putting out there. So make sure you subscribe on our YouTube channel and make sure you connect with us on LinkedIn. At the end of the video, we're going to give you that information, so make sure you do that so that you can get access to the 4 videos following on this one. So within the next 4 or 5 weeks, you're going to see information on us. The importance of the videos is to give you information and hopefully it'll encourage you to start your cybersecurity journey. So I want to welcome Dr. Chris Golden. Chris is a powerhouse cybersecurity person, and he's a strategic leader in compliance and a visionary CISO. When it comes to securing the future of business, compliance just isn't a requirement, but it's a necessity and it's a mandate in today's world. I am Doreen Gonzalez-Gaboyan. I am the CEO and president of IWS Cyber and the founding person of the Cyber Ready program, along with Dr. Chris Golden and others. So today we want to focus in on how we can get you started in the cybersecurity journey. So Chris, I'm going to start with a stat that a lot of us continue to see. If you're not seeing it, you should be seeing it. But 43% of cyber attacks target a small business. Yet many business owners still don't believe that they'll be affected by cyber attacks. Chris, what do you have to say about that?
I think that is right on target, Doreen. The bad guys have shown a propensity to do 2 things here we've seen probably over the past 5 years or so. The first is they're going to go after small businesses that are in their actual target's supply chain. So they won't go after the big businesses. They're not going to go after the Apples or the Chase Banks or Lockheed Martins of the world. They're going to go after the small businesses that are part of their supply chain because those businesses typically do not have the cyber hygiene to keep the bad guys out. And we have seen a response from the industry because of that targeting, where those business partners, those clients, those customers, even the governments and the regulators are starting to say, hey, even if you're a small business, you need a much better and improved cyber hygiene posture to join the ecosystem. All this stuff is interconnected. And so the bad guys are going after the small businesses very intentionally. The second thing the bad guys are using is automation. So we hear about artificial intelligence a lot, and the bad guys are certainly leveraging that to go after small businesses. And you got to remember, this is a robot, right? So the robot doesn't look at you and go, oh, you're a small business, you're too small for me to go after, or oh, you're a small business, you don't have anything really valuable. It's going to attack you because it's programmed to attack everything it finds. And once it finds a way in, it's going to notify its handler, a bad guy, bad girl somewhere around the world, said, hey, I'm into this corporation, I'm into this company. And then the human will come in and start looking around for things of value, or maybe again, where you're connected to see if there's value in swimming upstream to a real potential target. But again, just because you're a small business, don't ever think that you're too small to be targeted or that you don't have any critical information that the bad guys want. It really doesn't matter in today's world.
Yeah, Chris, so that's sort of scary, right? When we start to think about business owners, right? So the main focus of what we're doing today and ongoing is to really support small and medium-sized businesses, right? So those businesses that don't necessarily have a CISO like you on board, they don't necessarily have a cybersecurity executive that's leading the cybersecurity protocols within an organization. So when we started this initiative, it's really to, how do we help small businesses understand what cybersecurity is, how they can obtain cybersecurity readiness without, I guess, breaking the bank, and then how they can move into cyber readiness in a pathway, right? So that's the whole goal of what we're doing. So I wanted to also bring an article up that was by Accenture, right? So Accenture, we all recognize Accenture as a leader in this field, and they're the ones that did that study with the 43%. But they also stated in the study, Chris, that only 14% of those small businesses were prepared, right? So that's such a small fraction when we talk about, so in today's conversation, it's all about Make America Great Again, right? And so we talk about bringing back all this new work into our borders, and we talk about new companies coming into the United States, but we all want to do business with Apple. We all want to do business with large enterprise. We think that that's a great target. But what I found out in the last 2 years and plus, corporations only do business with companies that are ready, right? So they only do business with companies that are compliant, that have insurance in place, that have these type of cybersecurity protocols in place. And so I know I feel like it's something that I say over and over and over again, but corporations, out there on the front lines saying they want to do business with us, but back in, those people that are making sure that we meet all the requirements are saying no, they're not ready to do business with you. So what do you think is the biggest gap and why companies aren't starting their cybersecurity journeys?
Yeah, I think without a doubt, it's the human tendency to think it won't ever happen to me.
Yeah.
See that in healthcare all the time, right? People smoke an entire life and then are surprised they get lung cancer because their entire life they thought that it's not going to happen to me. Eat fast food every day and then they get overweight and then get diabetes and then have heart problems and they thought that's never going to happen to me. That's just a tendency of human nature to think, oh, it's not going to happen to me. But if you just sort of open the aperture of what you're looking at on a daily basis, you will see news reports or broadcasts or a whole bunch of other kind of things in the media talking about all kinds of businesses that are getting breached. And it, again, runs the gambit. It's every industry and it's every size. But again, we've seen the bad guys specifically targeting the small and medium-sized business because they know, as you said, they don't have a CISO. They don't have a security program in place. They don't have a big IT staff that can help them. Probably just 3 or 4 people, maybe in a garage dog, and that's their entire team, right? And so nobody is specifically, at the cyber world and how it affects them, even though a lot of the things that they could be doing on the cyber side are relatively simple and frankly cheap. Yeah, you can spend a lot of money if you want to. There's no question about that. But the basics are the basics, and they do eliminate a lot of the problems. But I think it's just human nature to think it's not going to happen to me. And then the budget part, businesses don't have huge budgets, obviously. So again, most of the basics of cybersecurity are relatively cheap once you get in there and understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And we seen it, as we were embarking with 1,000 companies that onboarded into the Cyber Ready program. And they range from micro, the small companies, all the way to larger companies. And we seen the gaps in the companies and why they weren't doing it. Chris, when we helped the company that came to us like right before Christmas, right, and they're out of New Mexico and they're service maintenance company. They've been around for decades and they're a disabled veteran, and their case studies on our website. But one of the things that shakes me up is when they come in, they're frantic and they say, just got this, or I'm not able to bid on this project, or I'm going to lose a contract because I can't attest to the fact that I am ready. I'm cyber secure. And when we got that phone call, Chris, a couple weeks before Christmas, I'm, to talk for that week-long session, and we get this phone call, and you were able to spin on a dime and help them understand where they were in their cyber readiness. But it ended happily because they were almost 100%. I think they were 90%. They had to put a couple of policies in place and make some changes. But what they went through as a company for that 30 days to understand that we're almost there, and all they had to do was these quick changes, relatively inexpensive, and then they were able to self-attest. But what I wanted you to talk about, you sent me an article of the DoD contractor that 11.2 million, right, that they DOJ got them for, right? So, and this is a company that was self-attesting that they were compliant. So, and I think that's where a little bit of a larger corporation, but 11.2 million, right? So tell us a little bit about that background. And then I want you to go into, what's 2025, give us a quick recap of the federal compliances and how that's, pushing corporations, Chris.
Sure. So we'll tackle the Department of Justice first. So yeah, the company be a Department of Defense contractor. It really doesn't matter who you're a contractor for, if it's to a government organization, either at the federal or state level, and maybe even the local level. We haven't seen at the local level, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist there as well. And they were told in their contract, you have to achieve a certain level of cybersecurity hygiene to maintain this contract. And they said, yes, Mr. and Mr. Government, we do in fact achieve compliance with that. And here's our self-attestation. And then they were breached, and they notified a number of parties about the breach. And then the Department of Justice rolled in and said, well, wait a minute. If you were compliant with the standard, you probably should not have been breached so easily. Let's take a look at what you were really doing. And as the Department of Justice sort of peeled that onion, they found out that they were not, in fact, compliant with the standard, and they had lied to the government. And there's a law in the books called the False Claims Act. That means you get an $11 million fine if you lie to the government, is basically what it means. And so the Department of Justice said, well, you attested that you were, in fact, compliant with this, but in reality, you were not in compliance with this, and you got breached, and it harmed the government. So here's an extra fine of $11.2 million for you lying to the government. And so it's not just, taking it seriously and what you're supposed to do and reporting it. It's putting up like this, where companies are trying to gain an economic advantage by not investing in their cybersecurity posture and taking that money and putting it elsewhere, and then hoping, again, as we've talked about, that it won't happen to them. And when it does, it blows a very spectacular way. So that's sort of the notion, is you can just sort of lie to the sort of hope nothing happens, because if you do get owned by a bad guy or bad girl, and the government finds out, they're going to come ask some questions that you may be very uncomfortable having to answer. So that's that. In terms of what's going on sort of in the future, so President Obama, many years ago, was in office, decided that he did not like the fact that every U.S. government agency at the federal level had different standards, different lexicons, different definitions of what sensitive information was. In the Department of Defense, it was FOUO, for official use only. That was a big one for the DoD. If you were working over the Department of Justice, it was LES, or law enforcement sensitive. So everybody sort of had a whole bunch of different definitions of this sensitive data. And he said, nope, I don't like that. The federal government needs one definition. And so he created the CUI program, the Controlled But Unclassified Information Program, and said every agency is going to now use the moniker CUI, and how you're going to protect that information, and your contractors are going to protect that information. A number of things came out of that executive order. The first was the National Institute of Science and Technology, Standards and Technology, NIST, was said, hey, write the standard for how companies need to protect CUI. And so they wrote a publication called NIST Special Publication 800 Tech 171 that lists 110 controls that a government contractor would need to follow to protect the CUI they are either given by the government or they create on behalf of their government contract. So that was the first step. The second step was a CUI clause for contracts needed to be created by the contracting folks. And even though now many, many years through, that clause is actually going to come out into contracts this spring, later this already being touted around in the register. And so that will basically codify the program and make it real. And now every government agency will put that clause into their contract saying, hey, contractor, Mr. Contractor, you need to protect any CUI via the 171 standard that NIST created. I happened to be Department of Defense at the time helping them, and the Department of Defense said, we can't wait. Too much data leaving the defense supply chain to our adversaries. The estimate was around $6 billion with a B dollars of intellectual property to our adversaries. So the Department of Defense said, we can't wait for all this other rulemaking to happen. So we're going to lean forward in the saddle, and we're going to create a program that I helped create, which is called CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program. And that will be the external validator to come into a defense contractor and validate as an audit that, yes, in fact, they are meeting the 171 standard. That's been in the contracts since about 2017. So the contract clause for the DoD's been there. But again, many companies were sort of pencil whipping it, lying that they were in compliance when, in fact, they were not. So now CMMC we created is going to come in and actually provided that the company is, in fact, compliant with the standard. A lot of questions I've heard over the past, let's say, 6 months with the election is, would the second Trump administration get rid of CMMC or would they keep it? And so he has not come out and said one way or the other, but there are a number of breadcrumbs that have been left by people that I think point us in a very specific direction. So the CMMC program was initially started under the first Trump administration. So the fact that he would, start a program and kill it in the second one doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's sort of breadcrumb one. Number two, one of the government officials that helped the program, her name is Katie Arrington. She worked for the defense and was heavily involved in creating the CMMC program. She was just brought back to the Department of Defense to do some. So again, that's another breadcrumb that the same person involved originally is now doing it again. And third, the Secretary of Defense said, hey, we're going to save about 9% from the DoD budget every year for the next 4 years for almost 50% savings. Said, but there are two exceptions to that 9% budget cut. Cybersecurity is one, and the security of the defense industrial base is two. CMMC is right smack in the middle of both of those things. So those three breadcrumbs lead most of us to believe that the CMMC program will not go away under the second Trump administration and will morph as we go forward. More government agencies start realizing that they have to now go figure out how they're going to enforce the 171 clause in their contracts. They could use self-attestation. They could use a CMMC-like program. They could use CMMC and leverage the same personnel that are doing that. They could come up with a completely different alternative. We don't know yet, but those kind of decisions should be happening here probably very quickly and probably over this summer.
So, and thanks for from the federal side. Like what we did when we launched the program was we looked at CMMC, we embedded CMMC 1 into the program, and we wrapped around all these other things that help companies to grow and how to differentiate themselves, with having cyber readiness, backbone of, even though they have it, but it's still something new that they can talk about. Now, you're in healthcare, you do a lot. You're primarily spending your days in healthcare. So those are different regulations than CMMC, but I want you to tell the audience on how, because I guess there's this big misunderstanding, CMMC is only for government, right? But, and Dr. Foreman, we bring her on, I think it's in session 4, she'll talk about how the compliance maps to different compliances. So quickly tell us, how that overlays sectors.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Cybersecurity is zeros and ones at the end of the day, right? High voltage and low voltage. And zeros and ones are not industry specific, right? Regardless of the end, you're still processing zeros and ones in your computer networks and all that kind of stuff. So there's really not a lot of major differences in how cybersecurity is done across industries. I've been in finance, I've been obviously in national defense, and now I'm in healthcare. All are very highly regulated, and you have to do things. But the basics are all basics on protecting data, preventing bad guys from getting on the network. If they happen to get on the network, how do you prevent them from getting data off the network or installing malware? All those kind of things are standard, again, across it. CMMC, is very DoD specific. However, as we've seen with the CUI rule federal-wide, we think that a CMMC-like program will also go federal-wide because these agencies will force that requirement somehow. They will have to go measure their contractors' ability to meet the standards. We think some kind of version of CMMC will go throughout that's the government standard. If you're a government regulator in any industry, Security and Exchange Commission, publicly traded company, Health and Human Services for healthcare for me, it really doesn't matter. Are you going to be willing to accept the federal standard as your standard? I think the answer is obviously yes. Those regulators will say we could do a high trust assessment if you're in the health world, or a SOC 2 type 2 if you're in banking and finance, or if you're working ISO 27001. Or we could take the federal standard, which is probably going to be something like CMMC and NIST Special Publication 800 TAC 171. We think the regulators will start leaning in that direction of accepting that kind of standard. And on many companies out there that have defense contracts as part of their portfolio, but that's not all the business they do. They have, maybe 80% of this is something else in the commercial side, but only 20% of their business is with the Department of Defense. Well, they still have to meet CMMC, even if it's only 20%. But that other 80% of the business can benefit from that CMMC security as they go out there and do marketing and advertising to their business partners and clients.
So basically what we're saying is that what we teach in the program, we actually have our third cohort coming up, is that cybersecurity is security, right? The cybersecurity, and that's what we teach in the program. So Chris, we have a few left on this session, and I want you to leave the audience with 5 tips, right? What are 5 tips that they can do? They log off. So everyone, get your pencils and papers ready. Chris, tell us the tips, and I'm also you're going to provide and get this information. They can download that as well. But go ahead, Chris. Give us 5 tips.
I think the first tip is train your people. And I'm going to attach a little cost to each one of these tips just so you understand. Very little cost, right? There are plenty of training programs out there on the internet. A lot of them are free, but provide some training. If you can't do it monthly, which is probably about the right battle rhythm, do it quarterly. If you can't do it quarterly, do it when you hire them on onboarding, and do it annually. But give them some training, give them some skills to fight back and defend your infrastructure for you. So I think that's the number one thing. And again, very low cost. Maybe a little bit of effort to get the training set up and send it out and sort of track who did it and who didn't. Really very little cost and something easy to do. I think the second is to train people specifically on phishing. So if those that don't know what phishing is, it's a fake email, right? So someone creates an email. I think we've all heard of the Nigerian prince that wants to send you $100 million, but you got to pay him $400 so he can execute the wire transfer, right? That's a typical. That's the number one entry point for malicious actors into people's. So a little extra training on how to spot a phish is probably going to pay dividends. And again, either no cost or very little cost to provide that training to your employees. The thing, I think, make this part of a constant conversation with your people, with your customers, if you've got a board, if you've got investors, make this a normal part of the conversation. A lot of times when I'm talking to boards about cybersecurity, I use the human resource example. I say, listen, how many of you on the board, raise your hand if you have any expertise in human resource, local, state, federal labor law. Of course, nobody raises their hand. And I go, well, how do you handle that risk? You create a little HR office. You hire an HR expert, to keep you out of. Cybersecurity is absolutely no different. You create a little cyber shop. You hire a cybersecurity person that can help you stay out of jail, right? And so have that conversation. The more you have that conversation, the more people are going to know, A, you take it seriously, and B, it's going to be a forcing function for you to do the right thing because now you have people setting expectations on what they think your cyber hygiene can do. Number 4, write some policies. A lot of auditors have come in and take a look at you. They're going to see, hey, what are your policies? Again, what's the cost of writing a policy? Hardly anything, right? Maybe an hour of your time to write a policy. And again, on the internet, there are plenty of templates and examples for you to look at and frankly plagiarize to make your own policies. Now make it fit your organization and your culture, but again, very low cost. And then I think the most important thing you can do to protect your company is to institute what we call multi-factor authentication, or MFA. If you're unfamiliar with that, if you type in a username and a password to get onto your network, that we consider that one factor authentication because it's something your username and something you have in your brain, and it's something so it's not it's something We want something else I have, like a token or something that you would be biometrics, like an eye scan or a fingerprint. When I open up my iPhone, it's taking a picture of my face, right, to let me into my iPhone. That's biometrics is what we're talking about. But multi-factor authentication, however you choose to do it, a little bit of a cost, not a lot, but will eliminate your cyber problems because it's very difficult for the malicious actors to break multi-factor authentication. It's almost impossible for the robots to do it. The artificial intelligence hasn't got that quite smart yet. And so MFA is the one thing you can do to protect your organization. And that's probably the only thing with any real cost. But again, the cost to implement MFA in a small company it's not trivial, but it's not going to break by any stretch of the imagination.
So Chris, thank you. And then we're going to close now on this session. And Chris, I'm so happy that you joined today and look forward to working with you in the third cohort. So I want to tell everyone that we have a third cohort of the Cyber Ready program beginning. The information is in the below, so feel free to take a look. If you have any questions for Chris or I, please reach out. In closing, we want to say to everyone here that's watching this video, get started. This isn't a risk if you're not taking your first steps. We want the supply chain to be secure, but ultimately what we want is business growth, right? So we want you to be able to grow your company. We want you to be sustainable, and we want you to stay in the marketplace as we continue to see the nation move in a different direction. Hopefully, all of us can future wealth, share it with our family, share it with our friends, hire new employees, and just get out there and be profitable and a part of the bigger picture. So Chris, again, thank you for your time today. And everyone look for the next sessions coming up. We have 4 more sessions. The next session is how to know when you're cyber ready. What is the compliance puzzle? Keeping hackers out, and cybersecurity business growth. And we have special speakers in all of those sessions. So signing off today, Chris, Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and thank you everyone for watching this video.